One. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 18th episode of season 2 of Coffee with Ashish. And today we've got two very special guests with us from Singapore, Chee Pey and GB Srithar from Singapore Tourism Board. We are so privileged and happy to have you both with us. And just for everybody's knowledge and information, India and Singapore share very special ties over the last, a century or so. And all of us, it's the nearest next door neighbor for us. And we are all we admire Singapore as a country and what it's done. And Indians as a tourism destination also look at Singapore, whether it's business or family vacations. And so all of you, as you may know, that Singapore Tourism Board recently announced a new initiative called Singapore Reimagine in November 2020 to reimagine travel for Singapore and rest of the world by sparking conversations, stories, and ideas to collectively shape the future of our sector. And I want to show you a small video, 30-second video of how you can reimagine travel in Singapore post-COVID, from food to attraction to tours and experiences, how visitors would be able to discover them from a new angle. So let me share this small 30 seconds video with all of you.
How would you reimagine travel? The possibilities are endless. It's time to let your imagination fly.
So as you can see, Singapore is already geared up for the new world order post-COVID. And, with this, I want to take this opportunity to introduce our guests for today's evening. So our first guest today is Chee Pey. Chee Pey currently heads Singapore Tourism Board's international group. He is responsible for STB's global market strategies, international relations, and oversees STB's 21 regional offices and 6 market representatives around the world. Prior to his present appointment, Chee Pey was the regional director for STB's Europe, India, and South Asia operations from 2012 to 2016. Chee Pey has extensive experience in leading culturally diverse teams across multiple international offices. He has held a dual appointment of Director International Marketing and Regional Director Southeast Asia from 2007 to 2008. And in this role, his key responsibility was to integrate STB's corporate marketing priorities with frontline marketing activities. Prior to this, he has also served as Director of Sightseeing and Cruise with STB's Leisure Group, and he's been extremely instrumental in some of the key developmental projects like the Singapore Flyer and $10 million Singapore Fly Cruise Development Fund. He also headed the STB Integrated Resort Working Team and managed the request for concept process for the Integrated Resort project. He currently serves as on the board of directors for Singapore Symphony Group, Singapore Science Center, and Singapore GP Limited. Our second guest for today's evening, GB Srithar, who is the Regional Director, India, Middle East, and South Asia, Singapore Tourism Board. He's based shuttles between Mumbai and Singapore. He has worked for Singapore Tourism Board for more than 2 decades now in various leadership positions. Prior to his appointment as Regional Director, he headed the brand campaigns team at STB's HQ Marketing Group. He has also spent more than a decade in HR functions, and he served as Area Director for South Asia, South India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. In his current role, Srithar is also responsible for STB's regional marketing, tourism development, and trade partnership work with India, Southeast Asia, and Middle East, including leisure marketing, MICE, cruise, and school trips promotions. He also works closely with travel trade and non-trade partners to promote the destination. Together with STB's team, Srithar's strong belief in establishing people's connections, working in partnership and collaboratively with the travel trade community for mutually beneficial relationships, and engaging customers' priority and win their hearts and minds through creative initiatives. He is a graduate from National University of Singapore with Bachelor of Social Science and Honours degree. With this, a very warm welcome to our esteemed guests today, Chee Pey and GB Srithar. I would like to request my host and partner Ashish Kumar, who is a thought leader and visionary himself in the travel and trade community. I would request Ashish to welcome our guest today and initiate the conversation with them.
Thank you, Karthik, and welcome Chee Pey and Srithar. It's always a pleasure to see you guys from a country which probably I say to myself that probably half of India, when they look back on their memories, would put Singapore at top of the order, having visited. So, and we talk about memories. I read this slogan somewhere. It's not for Singapore, but I read it, but it fits it in Singapore very well. It says, we don't create holidays, we create memories. And surely Singapore does that. And for me, who's been in the travel industry now for over 41 years, when I look back, and I have traveled, of course, very extensively into Singapore, when I look back, some of the most classical remembrances I have are built around Singapore. For example, in 1980s, I used to work for the Oberois in Mercury, and we launched a package known as Singapore Surprise, which was Oberoi Imperial those days. And in the planning stages, I visited Singapore a few times. And on one breakfast morning, there was no table available at Imperial. And so I was told, sir, do you mind sharing a breakfast table with another gentleman? And very reluctantly, I said yes. And I was taking to the table, I saw a very broad shoulder man drooping down till I looked him in the face, and it happened to be Ratan Tata. And later do we obviously realize, so I look back and say I shared a table with Ratan Tata. And of course, Ratan Tata and the Singapore Airline venture now is fresh in our mind today. The second part, and when Karthik was introducing Chee Pey, these are little trivias. I happen to have set up a joint venture for P&O Group and Great Eastern in India, and where Singapore and Bangkok and Hong Kong was part of the territory of P&O Travel. And I happened to be on a cruise, a Swan Hellenic cruise between Singapore and Penang, just to study and recce to, so that my team could handle that in India. And the experience I had when I boarded the cruise terminal, even in the 90s, was amazing. I wasn't prepared to see a cruise terminal look like that, having seen cruise terminals, of course, in India, in Cochin and Bombay's, etc. And lastly, of course, another experience, I would say, which goes well for Singapore. In the 2000, I attended a corporate travel event in one of the exhibition centers, a well-known corporate travel event. And somehow I managed to have my briefcase taken away from me during the conference. And I panicked and took a cab to the nearest police station to say, somebody's stolen my briefcase and my passport is in it. Yeah. And very coolly, the police officer took the report down, had me escorted to the hotel and say, you just wait in your room, we'll get back to you. And probably in 1 hour's time, somebody knocked on my door and had a briefcase in his hand with my passport and everything, having located this individual who had flicked it. So, I mean, those are tales I still remember. So welcome both of you.
Thank you, Ashish.
Ashish.
And thank you, Karthik, for the very warm and rather long introduction. But thank you so much for both your kind words. Maybe I'll just start off with some quick reactions to the sharings that you had, Ashish.
Yeah.
India is very close to my heart. I spent a total of 5 years in India doing 2 stints.
Right.
I was first there in 1999 to 2002 when I was first posted out as a manager of the Singapore Tourism Board. And then I came back again in 2012 to 2014. And at that point in time, I had my family with me, my wife and 2 young child. So we have a lot of fond memories of Bombay. So it's always great to be back and reconnect with my Indian friends. Yeah, the first thing you said about the memories, right? I think that reminds me of many of the interactions of consumers that we encounter during our road shows. And many of the time, people tell us that Singapore is not once in a lifetime or once just a destination that you visit once. It's always a destination that you go back to at different life stages, right? So I remember distinctly that one lady was telling me that the first overseas vacation she took as a family when she was a young child was the parents brought her to Singapore. And then later on, when she was about to graduate, she took a trip with some of her friends coming back to Singapore again. And when she got married and she had a child, again, Singapore was their first overseas vacation. So really, I think what really struck me about the conversations was how Singapore was able to feature very deeply in people's heart. And it's always a place that people come back time and time again.
That's indeed true. And if I may, should I just start with Chee Pey first?
Sure, please.
I want to ask him. And of course, to remind the folks and audience that personally, my last overseas visit before we had a countdown was Singapore. I was in Singapore for the digital travel technology meet, which took place in December 2019. I attended that. And of course, 2 months later, the world came into a lockdown. And obviously, we haven't traveled since that. But coming back, we know, JP, what the pandemic impact has been worldwide. So it'll be very important for our viewers and me to understand how Singapore handled it from a tourism perspective, and what measures has the Singapore as a destination taken during this period. So over to you.
Thanks, Ashish. You know, I'm always very hesitant to talk about our experience with COVID, because I remember I was actually in London in March when I had also a trade interview. And at that point in time, the picture in Singapore was still quite rosy. We had just a few in the 20s or 30s numbers of cases. And it seems that at that point in time that we were able to handle the COVID rather well. Then, of course, things start to spike, you know, when we have an outbreak in the foreign workers' dormitories, right? You know, and then we went into what we call a circuit breaker for about 6 weeks, right? So, you know, I'm always hesitant to say that we are on a good path, because I know this COVID-19 is such a sneaky virus, right? I know it's so hard to contain. And similarly, I think just as we thought that things were on the mend in, say, the fourth quarter of last year, when Singapore started to launch more green lanes, and now we are seeing, I guess, a resurgence of new variants around the world. And that has made different governments calibrated their response, right? I would say right now we are in a fairly good place. I think I was just looking at the case count today. Unfortunately, today we had a rather high case count, about 58 cases, of which 3 are in the local communities. But majority of the case counts are people that came to Singapore because either they are construction workers or they are foreign dormitory workers that are coming to Singapore to work. And this was cases that were detected when they were serving their quarantine at designated hotels in Singapore. So I think one of the things that Singapore has, well, there's a couple of things that we've done well. I think one is we are able to understand and know the virus a lot better. And I think that has helped us to calibrate some of the measures that we've undertaken. I think secondly, I think we have been able to do contact tracing and safe management measures very well in Singapore, right? I mean, when there's a case that's been floated out in the community, through the different contact tracing methods, including use of apps, we're able to locate where the person has been to and some of the people that they have been in contact with, and be able to, you know, take the appropriate measures to contain the situation before it gets out of hand. And I think a major sort of strategy that we've undertaken is really to institute border controls to make sure that we allow people in a controlled manner, and then to require people from higher risk countries to serve quarantine, mostly in designated hotels. So in a way, the different measures that has been put in place has enabled us to have the situation fairly under control. I think right now, if you come to Singapore, people do go about their life quite as normal. I mean, with the necessary measures, we wear masks right now, always when we go out. We try to keep a safe distance to other people. And when we gather with friends, we limit ourselves to not more than groups of 8 at one time, which is the maximum number of people that can gather together outside the home, right? So I think all the measures taken together has really helped Singapore to keep a lead on the COVID-19 and enable life to go back as fairly normal as possible in today's times.
That sounds pretty reassuring, of course, the way it's been handled. But allow me to get into to Srithar, my friend, who I had welcomed a few years ago on a FICCI panel, which I do again today. Welcome, Srithar. And I have a question. Yeah, and I will, of course, pose a question to you about India and how's STB positioning itself in Indian market.
I think for India, Singapore is considering the source markets. India was the 3rd largest source market before the pandemic came. So in 2019, India was the 3rd largest source market. We welcomed 1.42 million visitors from India to Singapore. It is a market which has given a lot of different types of visitors. So family travelers are very key from India into Singapore, but over the last couple of years and half a decade, working millennials, cruise travelers, in terms of cruise, India is our #1 cruise source market. MICE, meetings, incentives, conventions, and exhibitions, especially in the meetings and incentive space, Indian travelers are also again among the top meetings and incentive source market for Singapore. So in many ways, India is a very key market. And when this pandemic happened, and I still remember when the when the lockdown started, and if I go back to the date, I think it is March 22nd, when India went into a lockdown, and Chee Pey calls me. So we were like thinking of whether we should stay or move, and we thought, okay, better get back to Singapore. And I still remember the eve of 22nd, my boss, Chee Pey, calls me and says, hey, Srithar, maybe come back to Singapore for the time being. And I still remember it was, in my mind, time being was a couple of months.
Yeah.
But the couple of months stretched close to a year now. So the key responsibility for us in Singapore Tourism Board India team has been to keep the connections going. We were quite quick off the bat to make sure that we are connecting with the travel trade. So we were communicating very regularly what were the updates coming out of Singapore. At one point in time, it was the case numbers and borders are still open. We are safe. We are taking care of the relevant protocols. So please come over to Singapore. And then at some point when we realized that, nope, we are going into a circuit breaker and it is going to be a long haul, we again communicated what we are doing. So in the trade front, we adopted a united, we stand. And I'm very happy that we did that, because I think at some point we had to communicate to our travel trade partners, partner friends, we don't call them partners, partner friends, because they have been instrumental for the numbers that Singapore has been getting. So we communicated very clearly with them and indicated a sense of solidarity with them under the united we stand. So that trade engagement momentum has kept us going. We have been doing a lot of connection activities, whether it's webinars, virtual exhibitions, you name it, we have done a lot of them. And then on the consumer engagement side, again, we said, look, we cannot be silent. And it is important that we get into a mindset. It is BAU year still, meaning it is not business as usual, but business adapted for the unusual year. And we needed to communicate to the consumers out there, bringing Singapore to the consumers, because they are not coming to Singapore given the current circumstances. So we did a lot of virtual events, whether it's with Zomato, where we did a Zomaland at home. We did family festivals, a virtual family festival with Windmill Family Festival. So a few such activations. So we have been trying to make sure communications has been on, engagements have been going on. And that's how we have been keeping Singapore in the minds of the Indian travelers.
Yes. I've been seeing various alerts, and yes, Singapore has been on top of the mind in the Indian market space, no doubt. But back to you, Chee Pey, when I attend various Indian government officials' webinar or what India should do as a destination overseas in various source markets, the question I get asked, can you tell us what other countries are doing? So I want to ask you about Singapore. So what activities has Singapore been doing in the various source markets? India, of course, as Checha said, has been #3 source market. But that aside, 1, 2, 4, 6, how have you been doing in the other markets?
Is your question pertaining to pre-pandemic, or is pertaining to
what during the
pandemic?
During and now, planning post.
Yeah, actually right now, as what Srithar has pointed out, right, because the borders are largely still closed to most leisure visitors and even most business visitors. So what we have been doing in many of the major source markets is really to keep what we call the passive marketing on, to make sure that Singapore remains top of the mind awareness of people in terms of the destination that they most want to visit when the borders are able to be reopened. In fact, I think we have done a couple of surveys among consumers in some of the key source markets, including China itself. And I think we're quite heartened to hear that consumers are saying that they trust the way that Singapore is handling the situation. And they know that we are able to get a good handle of things, of the COVID situation. And they are looking forward to revisiting Singapore when they're able to in the coming, hopefully months, if not in the next 1 or 2 years. Right. At the same time, I think what we have been trying to do is to start to do little pilots to make sure that we test out certain protocols to set the foundation for us to be able to reopen. So let me just cite 2 examples. One is cruise. as Ashish, you're aware, cruise is one of the hardest hit industries with the COVID. Given some of the examples, for example, in Japan with I think Diamond Princess and with some other countries as well. So, but what we thought is that cruise is such an important industry to Singapore tourism. We needed to find a way to make cruise safe for people again. So we were, in fact, the first destination to introduce a cruise safe certification, working with two different cruise lines, Royal Caribbean and Dream Cruises, as well as a certification, international certification body to create this cruise safe certification. And I'm happy to note that since, I can't recall the month offhand, since I guess later part of last year, we have been able to restart domestic cruise to nowhere for Singapore residents and on both Dream Cruises as well as Royal Caribbean. So far, I think they've all done quite a number of sailings and it has been very, very successful so far. So, that's just one example. The second part is, of course, business events. That's a major sort of lifeline for us in terms of being able to hold global world-class business events in Singapore and to be able to draw travelers from all around the world to attend those events. So last November, we did a pilot called Travel Revive. We worked with Master Berlin to create this physical travel trade show in Singapore, where we had close to 1,000 attendees from Singapore itself, as well as 65 attendees from overseas coming, to attend the first ever sort of physical travel trade shows since COVID-19 hits in Asia. So I think that's quite a plus point. And through all these pilots, we are able to work out some of the protocols with regards to entry requirements, with regard to testings, to make sure that when we are ready to open our borders again, we'll be able to do so in a safe manner.
Right, right. And, I have myself been for the last decade actively involved in the Indian market as a transformation guy, trying to change the way the industry works and process. And I tell myself that in many ways, COVID has been the chief transformation officer. It's been done my job, which I haven't been really able to do in the Indian marketplace for many years, getting people to change the way they work. So Srithar would know, and I will ask him, of course, that today the internet reach, there are two things. One is the internet reach, and second is the internet penetration. So it is reaching tier 5 and tier 6 of the smallest cities in the country, and who are all aspirational in terms of taking a holiday, traveling, even if it's within the country. And of course, the usage. I have friends who set up Byju's, and he told me, the promoter, that our penetration prior to COVID in the education space was 7 to 8%, despite spending tremendous amount of money in getting people to go online for education. But during COVID, of course, has reached 85% mark. Although it may not stay 85, it may settle somewhere in the middle, but certainly penetration and reach has gone up. So Srithar, the question here is, how is Singapore tourism and India market, and how are you reacting to it in terms of your future promotions, marketing, and reach out?
I think, Ashish, a couple of points comes to mind, and thankfully over the last decade, we have been very, very clear that going digital, getting penetration into tier 2 cities or tier 3 cities through the digital platform is going to be very important. So even when Chee Pey was in the market in 2012, 2013, even back then we were talking about how do we go into digital penetration, and it was a very key agenda for us. What has happened prior to COVID was that we were doing a lot of collaborations where we were using the digital platform to engage the consumers. What it gives us an advantage is we can get very targeted and very calibrated in our messaging. If you need vernacular, we can go vernacular, where we have done some collaborations, whether with Maestro Ilayaraja or the late Dr. S.P. Balasubramaniam and K.J. Jesudas. We've done a music video with them, and it was purely a digital initiative. We have partnered with big brands like Ola, Paytm, Zomato, and all of that is to try and use the digital platform or the virtual platform and get into their target audience and communicate Singapore messaging to them. So that's one in terms of consumer engagement and so on and so forth. I think the other second point is also figuring out how digital helps us communicate messages, at the same time helps us drive visitorship to Singapore. So again, in that space, for example, the Ola partnership was along that lines, where we did marketing collaboration, but there was a sort of a drive to conversion where there were hotel and airline deals as part of the digital activations we did. So we are quite clear that it is going to be very important. And with this COVID, as you said, a lot more attention is now getting into the digital space. So we are going to continue looking at opportunities, working with different partners. The good thing is that we have been very cognizant. It is not just travel trade partners that we have to work with to communicate to consumers. It has to be also non-travel trade, high consumer touch partners like Zomato or Ola or Paytm, through whom we can also communicate to the audiences. So I think that's one step. I think what we are trying to also figure out is how can we bring technology also from just from a marketing angle, but it's also how do we make technology be part and parcel of the consumer's journey into Singapore. And there are some ideas that we are looking at. So let's see, once the COVID is, or maybe, I mean, we are doing various programs now to try and get some of these ideas going, but once COVID is over, I think we will have a lot more technology, digital, contactless solutions as part of the tourism consumer cycle.
Yeah, you mentioned Zomato, etc. I agree with you, because I've always maintained over the last few months that travel tourism, in fact, and all the products of travel tourism put together, which may be even bus and rail and so on in India, it would form the largest e-commerce segment. So the travel and tourism would have to be looked at as an e-commerce entity rather than just the vertical. And all the principles which apply to the principles of e-commerce in many ways will come into the picture. And I think Karthik is indicating that there is a video which we want to show at this stage. And I'll come back to the two of you with another round after that. So Karthik.
Thanks, Ashish. As you guys know, STB has been working closely with other government agencies in Singapore to launch the SG Clean campaign, which is aimed to reassure the public that businesses in Singapore maintain high standards of cleanliness and safeguards for the public health. We'll have a look at a small video which describes some of the measures undertaken by tourist establishments under this campaign.
That was a brilliant and a lively video. And you know, Singapore has always been known for its attractions and gourmet experiences, etc. But I tend to reminiscence in the 80s for all Indian visitors, and probably Srithar and Chepe will bear with me, the visit to Mustafa was probably the most important attraction. But coming back now, of course, consumer taste. So back to you, Chepe. So are there new tourism attractions we can look forward to as we open up and go into 2021, 22 and beyond?
Actually, there are a few consumer trends that we are starting to pick up, right, in the current COVID present world. I think one is that consumers are telling us that given the inconvenience of travel, right, they are looking to spend more time in the destinations and wanting to go a bit deeper than the usual checklist of attractions that they go to a country for, right? And I think this is something that we are also seeing amongst the Singapore residents itself, because right now almost all of us are not able to travel out of the country for a leisure holiday. So I think we're starting to rediscover many more parts of Singapore that we have not been to before in the past. So I think one of the big challenge for us after we reopen the borders is that can we translate some of this new content, new knowledge, and new passion about Singapore that Singaporeans already have, and to use them to be strong advocates for an international market. You know, just an example, this morning I brought 3 friends of mine, went on a short hiking trip, right? And was bringing them around the foothills of Mount Faber. And, you know, they were actually quite amazed at the places that I brought them to, because those are slightly off the beaten track and places that they've actually not been to in their 40 years plus years of their life here in Singapore itself. So I think that's something that I really want my team to do when we start to welcome visitors coming back. But of course, beyond going deeper into the attractions, we have also lined up quite a number of major world-class new developments in the coming years. The next major project that's likely to open is going to be the Mandai Park. That's going to have a number of world-class new attractions that will complement what's already there, which is the Night Safari, the Singapore Zoo, and the River Safari. I think the first to open will be the Bird Park. We are going to relocate the Bird Park, which many Indians love, from its present place in Jurong to Mandai. And I think it's not going to be just a relocation. They're going to have a chance to recreate an entire new bird park experience. And as a bird lover, I really can't wait to see that. You know, beyond the bird park, I think we also have some great plans for new areas like Jurong Lake, where we will have the new science center that's scheduled to open in 2025. So again, lots of new iconic attractions to make sure that we give more reasons for Indians to want to come to visit Singapore.
Wonderful. That sounds very interesting. And of course, nothing to take away the gourmet experience, especially on the waterfront in the evenings. That's a place just waiting to explode literally, so to say. You know, advocating the cause of technology-driven startups is something I've personally been leading charge in Indian market for the last 4 or 5 years, working with various, from ideation right to it. And I recently discovered, I honestly didn't know, Srithar, that Singapore tourism is supporting the cause of technology-driven startups. And one particular one which I've been mentoring, I'll take the name as well, Travel Stack, coincidentally rang me up, you know, just 2 days ago to say they have now shifted to Singapore. So this is a small startup, husband-wife, who started in India, has actually now moved into Singapore to further the cause of the support they've been able to get from Singapore tourism. So briefly tell us about the future plans and what should the startups in Indian market and elsewhere be looking forward to from Singapore.
Getting the travel fraternity in Singapore, getting into digital transformation and technology transformation has been on the agenda of STP for a while now, and I think it has accelerated over the last couple of years, and even more so last year. So I'll just give you 2 things. One, in June 2020, looking at how we can transform business models and get them to adopt digital solutions. There was a industry paper entitled "Thriving in the New Normal Through Technology and Transformation," where we laid out 5 imperatives. 1, create more contactless experiences. 2, providing new ways for customers to experience their products and offerings. 3, real-time monitoring and management of crowds and queues. 4, redesigning the workplaces for the safety of staff and crew. And 5, maintaining highest standards of hygiene and cleaning through new solutions. So this was a paper done, and then from there we did an open call for solutions to Singapore stakeholders to address these opportunities, and there were about 200 submissions from where we shortlisted 24 solutions and showcased them at a 2-day digital marketplace with close to 1,500 attendees. So that's one example. Second, I think the more recent and which is now happening is a Singapore Tourism Accelerator Program. And this program is is intended to be run from April to September 2021. And the Singapore Tourism Accelerator Program is a highly selective, equity-free 6-month program for the world's most promising technology startups or pre-scale-ups that can power the travel and tourism industry. And this is organized by STB and its appointed innovation partner, Found8. And this accelerator program will again throw up opportunities for startups to think and reimagine how travel and tourism could be. And some of those good ideas will then be found for them to collaborate with Singapore stakeholders and flesh out their ideas. So these are some examples of how we are getting technology and getting the partners, whether it is in Singapore or overseas, how can we collaborate and move forward in the new norms that are coming up in travel and tourism.
That sounds very interesting, and may I take the liberty here to suggest that maybe in future, at least for the Indian market as a geography, if Singapore Tourism and perhaps FICCI can collaborate to showcase to the Indian startup travel technology and have a pitch session or some kind of a session where they are invited to showcase themselves, and we offer these youngsters a platform to showcase. Bear that in mind for future. We would love to do that.
Sure.
But having said that, one last final word from you, Chee Pey, to the audience before we move off. I'm sorry, the time seems to be not on our side now.
I think just want to go back to what Srithar mentioned earlier, that Indians is our third largest source market. So this is a very important country that we place a lot of marketing attention to, especially given a long sort of history between Singapore and India itself. So even though we are not able to promote any travel at the moment, but we are hopeful that this is something that we can work towards too in a safe and sustainable way in the coming months, and we hope to be able to welcome Indian visitors back to our shores at the appropriate time.
Right. And from you, sir, one last closing word?
Well, I'll just close out with our trade engagement and also our work strategy, which is a theme, which is charting our pathways to tourism recovery. It is all about how can we work together with partners in market, Singapore stakeholders, to chart the pathways to tourism recovery. We hope that as we plot and look at the destinations, marketing, or positioning it to the Indian audiences, together we can work on some interesting strategies for the restart.
Right. So, that only gives me the confidence to believe that Singapore will continue to make memories for not only the Indian audience, but audience all over the world. But specifically so for Indian audience who consider Singapore as the first destination literally to be traveling to. So thank you very much, Chee Pey, for coming in, and Charissa for having a coffee with me today. And I would, of course, just pass you on to Karthik for any closing statement or observations he may have going forward.
No, I just want to express my gratitude. It was lovely to have you both, Chee Pey and Srithar, with us. And it was very interesting to see through the medium of those two videos as well. I think that's very reassuring and gives a lot of confidence to even us as potential travelers that, things are back to normal or the new normal. And it's, I'm sure people would have loved this session. And please accept our gratitude for being here with us. And as Ashish mentioned, we would love to collaborate and do more things together for promoting startups and pursuing the cause of joint collaboration between the two countries. So thank you so much once again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karthik. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ashish.
We'll see you
Bye-bye.
again sometime in the future.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.